The plasma bolt missed Raven Winter's head by inches, scorching the wall behind her as she dove behind a fallen concrete pillar. The ruins of New Shanghai's financial district provided plenty of cover, but the synth forces were advancing methodically, their superior technology giving them an edge in the urban warfare that had become humanity's last stand. Status report. Raven barked into her combat comm, checking the charge on her pulse rifle. The weapon's power cell glowed a dangerous orange, nearly depleted. Eastern sectors lost, Commander. Lieutenant Park's voice crackled through static. They're pushing through the underground tunnels. We can't hold them much longer. Raven cursed under her breath, her dark eyes scanning the battlefield through the haze of smoke and debris. The resistance had held this sector for 3 months, but the Synth Empire's latest offensive was unlike anything they'd faced before. Their new commander, known only as the Silver Death, had transformed the previously predictable synth tactics into something terrifyingly efficient. Another explosion rocked the ground, and Raven caught a glimpse of their enemy through the settling dust. The synth were humanoid, but their crystalline skin caught and reflected light like living mercury. Their movements were fluid, almost beautiful, if you could forget they were here to exterminate humanity. Fall back to Point Delta, Raven ordered, knowing each retreat brought humanity closer to extinction. We'll regroup at Dash. Her words died in her throat as a figure emerged from the smoke. Taller than the other synth, with skin that seemed to pulse with an inner light, the alien commander moved with deadly grace. Her armor was minimal, more ceremonial than protective, displaying the intricate patterns that swirled beneath her metallic skin. But it was her eyes that captured Raven's attention. They weren't the typical solid gold of the synth, but rather swirling pools of violet that seemed to hold entire galaxies. This was her, the Silver Death. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and time seemed to slow. Raven had expected to see hatred, or at least the cold indifference the synth were known for. Instead, she saw something that mirrored her own exhaustion, her own questioning of endless warfare. The moment shattered as a resistance fighter launched a desperate attack. The Silver Death moved like liquid lightning, disarming the soldier without killing him, a mercy Raven had never seen from the synth before. Their forces clashed around them, but the commander's attention remained fixed on Raven. You fight well, human, the Silver Death's voice carried across the chaos, melodic despite its alien timbre. But you must sense the futility of this resistance. Raven emerged from cover, pulse rifle trained on the commander. If you're so certain of our futility, why offer commentary? A smile flickered across the alien's metallic features. I am Thera Valris, and I've watched you, Commander Winters. Your tactics, your leadership, you're different from the others. You understand the cost of war. I understand that you invaded our world without provocation, Raven countered, but something in Thera's words rang true. She had always seen patterns where others saw chaos, and the synth's campaign had never quite made sense to her. Is that what you believe? Thera took a step forward, ignoring the weapon pointed at her heart. That we chose this war. Your leaders have kept many truths from you, Commander. Truths that could end this conflict. Before Raven could respond, a massive explosion lit up the sky. The ground beneath them gave way, and Raven found herself falling. Strong arms wrapped around her, and she felt the strange sensation of Thera's crystalline skin against her own as the alien commander shielded her from the collapse. They landed hard in what appeared to be an ancient subway tunnel, cut off from both their forces. Raven struggled to break free, but Thera held firm. Listen to me, the alien commander's voice was urgent now. I could have let you die. I could have killed you a dozen times in the past months. Ask yourself why I haven't. Raven stopped struggling, her tactical mind racing. The inconsistencies in the synth's campaign, their sudden change in tactics, the way this commander had systematically captured territory while minimizing casualties on both sides. Why are you really here? Raven asked, finally voicing the question that had nagged at her for months. Thera's violet eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. Because there is something far worse than us coming, Commander Winters. And if humans and synth don't learn to trust each other very soon, neither of our species will survive to see the next solar cycle. The distant sound of fighting filtered down through the debris above them, but in that moment, staring into those alien eyes that held both threat and promise, Raven felt the course of the war, and her life, shifting irrevocably. "Tell me everything," she said. And in the darkness beneath a burning city, two commanders from warring species began to forge an understanding that would change the fate of both their worlds. The synth command ship, Stellar Tide, hung in low Earth orbit like a shard of crystal against the darkness of space. In her private quarters, Thora Valrys watched the planet below, its surface scarred by 3 years of war. Behind her, Raven Winters paced the chamber, processing everything she'd just learned. "Let me get this straight," Raven said, running a hand through her short black hair. "You're saying there's an ancient species of biomechanical parasites hibernating in deep space, and they're about to wake up?" "The Nexus," Thora corrected, turning to face her unlikely ally. "They seeded thousands of worlds with dormant spores millions of years ago. When a civilization reaches a certain technological threshold, the spores activate. They consume all organic and synthetic matter, using it to rebuild their army." Raven stopped pacing. "And humanity's development of quantum computing triggered the spores on Earth." "Yes. We detected the activation signal 6 months ago." Thora's crystalline fingers traced patterns in the air, bringing up a holographic display of Earth's solar system. Red dots appeared throughout the asteroid belt. "The spores are already beginning to stir. We estimate 3 months before they reach maturity." So the synth invasion was an attempt to evacuate as many humans as possible while containing the threat. Thora's violet eyes dimmed. "But your governments refused to listen. They saw only conquerors, not saviors. We had to play that role to prevent panic and maintain order during the evacuation." Raven leaned against the viewport, her reflection overlapping with the Earth below. "Why didn't you just tell us the truth? The last civilization we warned openly descended into chaos. Billions died in the panic before the Nexus even arrived." Thora moved closer, her silver skin catching the starlight. "We learned to be more diplomatic after that." "Diplomatic?" Raven laughed bitterly. "You call this diplomatic?" "No," Thora admitted, and something in her voice made Raven turn. The alien commander stood barely a foot away now. "But I'm hoping we can find a better way. Together." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. Raven found herself studying Thora's alien features, the way her skin shifted like quicksilver, the subtle patterns that pulsed beneath the surface, the depths of those extraordinary eyes. She'd never thought she'd find a synth beautiful, yet here she was. A sharp alarm shattered the moment. Red light flooded the chamber as Thora's second-in-command, Chiron, burst through the door. "Commander. We've detected multiple emergence points in the asteroid belt. The Nexus, they're awakening ahead of schedule." Thora's expression hardened. "Show me." The holographic display shifted, showing dozens of asteroids breaking apart as something emerged from within. The shapes were organic yet mechanical, like insects made of living metal. As they watched, the creatures began to combine, forming larger and more complex structures. "How long?" Thora demanded. "At their current rate of assembly, 2 weeks, maximum." Raven felt her blood run cold. "Earth isn't ready. We haven't even begun evacuations." "Then we adapt," Thora said, her tactical mind already racing. "Chiron, order all ships to begin immediate civilian evacuation protocols. Priority to population centers and scientific installations." She turned to Raven. "I need you to contact your resistance cells. They trust you. Tell them what's coming. Help us save as many as we can." But Raven was staring at the display, something clicking in her mind. "Wait. Look at their emergence pattern." She pointed to the hologram. They're not random. They're forming a net, trying to cut off all escape routes from Earth. Thera studied the pattern, her eyes widening. She's right. They're more intelligent than we thought. They're using our own containment strategy against us. Commander, Chiron interrupted, his golden eyes fixed on a new alert. We're detecting similar emergence patterns around all 14 worlds we're protecting. It's a coordinated attack. The implications hit them all at once. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. The Nexus had been playing a longer game, waiting for the synth to spread themselves thin, protecting multiple worlds. Now they were springing their trap. Thera's hand found Raven's in the red-lit darkness. Her crystalline fingers intertwined with human ones, an unconscious gesture that neither of them acknowledged but neither pulled away from. We need a new strategy, Thera said quietly. Something they won't expect. Raven squeezed her hand, an idea forming. Then let's give them something they've never seen before, humans and synth fighting as one. It's never been done, Chiron protested. Our technologies aren't compatible. Our tactics dash. Exactly, Raven cut him off. That's why it will work. The Nexus has encountered both our species before, but never together. Never unified. Thera's skin rippled with shifting patterns, a sign of deep thought among her people. Finally, she nodded. Prepare my shuttle. We need to speak with the human resistance leadership immediately. You want to go planetside now? Chiron seemed shocked. Commander, it's too dangerous. Let me send an envoy dash. No, Thera's voice was firm. They need to see us together. Need to understand that everything has changed. She turned to Raven. Will you stand with me? Raven looked at their still joined hands, then up at the alien who had gone from enemy to humanity's best hope for survival. Always. As they prepared to depart, neither of them voiced the other truth hanging between them, that somewhere between war and extinction, between duty and desperation, they'd found something neither species had expected. Something that might just save them all. The future of two species now rested on convincing humanity's scattered resistance that their greatest enemy was now their only ally. And they had 2 weeks to do it. The resistance bunker beneath the ruins of Old Denver was silent as Raven finished speaking. 50 of Earth's most hardened fighters stared at her with expressions ranging from disbelief to outright hostility. Beside her, Thera stood motionless, her silver skin dimmed to match the bunker's dull metal walls, a subtle gesture of diplomacy that Raven hadn't expected from the synth commander. General Santos, his face scarred from countless battles against the synth, was the first to break the silence. You expect us to believe this? That the entire war was some kind of rescue mission? I expect you to look at the evidence, Raven replied, projecting the latest satellite imagery onto the bunker's main screen. The Nexus structures in the asteroid belt had grown exponentially over the past 24 hours, their biomechanical forms now clearly visible from Earth. This could be synth propaganda, Colonel Wei argued, but her voice lacked conviction. They had all seen too much to dismiss the threat entirely. Thera stepped forward, her movement drawing every weapon in the room. She ignored them, instead raising her hand to interface with the human technology. The display shifted, showing historical records from dozens of worlds. These are the last transmissions from civilizations that faced the Nexus alone, she said, her melodic voice carrying an edge of urgency. We didn't save them. We were too late, too cautious, too bound by protocol. I refuse to let Earth become another entry in this archive. The images were horrifying. Worlds transformed into biomechanical hives, entire species absorbed into the Nexus collective. But it was the final image that struck deepest, a synth colony world, its crystalline cities shattered, its people corrupted into twisted parodies of their former selves. They can assimilate your kind too, Raven realized aloud. Yes, Thera's response was barely a whisper. We are not as different as either side believed. Both organic and synthetic, both vulnerable to their corruption. General Santos studied the synth commander with new eyes. You're risking everything by showing us this. Why? Because Thora hesitated, glancing at Raven. Because we have seen enough death. The Nexus doesn't discriminate between our species. Neither should we. Before anyone could respond, the bunker's proximity alarms screamed to life. Lieutenant Park burst through the door, her face pale. Multiple contacts entering atmosphere. They're not synth, the patterns are all wrong. Raven and Thora moved as one to the tactical display. The objects entering Earth's atmosphere were unlike anything they'd seen before, part living tissue, part machine, all horror. They're early, Thora's skin pulsed with urgent patterns. The calculations were wrong. They're not just awakening, they're evolving. The bunker erupted into action. Whatever doubts the Resistance had harbored about their synth allies vanished in the face of this new threat. General Santos barked orders, coordinating with Thora's ships in orbit while Colonel Wei organized ground defenses. In the chaos, Raven felt Thora's hand grasp her arm. The synth commander pulled her into a side chamber, her violet eyes intense. "There's something I haven't told you," Thora said, her voice low. "Something I discovered in the ancient records. The Nexus, they've been here before, thousands of years ago. They're not just coming to consume us. They're coming home." Raven's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" Earth wasn't just seeded with spores. It was their primary incubation world. The patterns beneath your planet's crust, the ones your scientists attributed to tectonic activity. Their Nexus architecture, dormant for millennia. If they reactivate that network, Earth becomes their new hive world, Raven finished, horror dawning. And everything on it becomes part of them. An explosion rocked the bunker. Through the reinforced walls, they could hear the first screams as the Nexus vanguard made planetfall. Thora's skin rippled with emotion as she stepped closer to Raven. "I won't let that happen," she said fiercely. "Not to your world. Not to you." The intensity in her voice made Raven's heart race. Without thinking, she reached up to touch Thora's face, marveling at how the living crystal responded to her touch, warming and softening beneath her fingers. "We won't let it happen," Raven corrected. "Together." For a moment, they stood there, human and synth, warrior and commander, no longer divided by species or history but united by something deeper. Then another explosion shook them back to reality. "Commander." Chiron's voice crackled through Thora's communications array. "The Nexus ships, they're targeting the planetary defense grid. But there's something else. They're sending a signal into the Earth's core." Raven and Thora shared a look of determination. They had minutes, maybe hours, before the ancient network beneath Earth's surface awakened. Their only hope was to unite two species that had been trying to kill each other just days ago. As they rushed back to the command center, Thora caught Raven's hand one last time. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "knowing you has made me question everything I thought I knew about humanity. About connection. About." She trailed off, struggling with concepts her species rarely expressed. "I know," Raven squeezed her hand. "Me too." Then they were back in the chaos of war, but something had changed. As human resistance fighters and synth warriors coordinated their defenses, as ancient enemies became desperate allies, two commanders led them not just with strategy and skill, but with the power of their own transformation. The Nexus had come to reclaim Earth, expecting to find two species divided by hatred. Instead, they would face something unprecedented, humanity and synth standing as one, their greatest weakness transformed into their greatest strength. And at the heart of it all, a love that defied the boundaries of species, a love that might just save them all. The skies above Earth had become a battlefield of impossible scale. Synth ships, their crystalline hulls glowing with power, fought alongside retrofitted human vessels against the encroaching Nexus swarm. The enemy's biomechanical ships moved like a living virus, consuming everything in their path and incorporating it into their ever-growing mass. Deep beneath the surface, in a recently discovered Nexus control node, Raven Winters and Thora Valrys raced against time. The ancient chamber was a nightmare fusion of organic and mechanical components, all of it pulsing with an sickly green light that made Thora's silver skin look almost ghostly. "The signal's getting stronger," Thora announced, her hands dancing over alien control surfaces. "Earth's core temperature is rising. The dormant network is responding." Raven studied the holographic displays they'd managed to activate, showing the spreading web of Nexus architecture beneath Earth's crust. "How long?" "Hours at most. Once the network fully activates," Thora stopped, her violet eyes widening as new data streamed across the displays. "No, this can't be right." "What is it?" "These readings. Earth wasn't just an incubation world. It was their origin point." Thora's voice trembled. "The first Nexus arose here, created by an ancient human civilization that existed millions of years ago. They were trying to achieve immortality by fusing organic and synthetic life." Raven felt her world tilt. "That's impossible. Humanity isn't that old." "No, but your planet is. The civilization that created the Nexus was wiped out when their creation turned on them. The survivors." Thora's skin rippled with realization. "The survivors fled to the stars, seeding other worlds. Some evolved into different species. Some." She looked down at her crystalline hands, "some transformed themselves into living crystal to resist Nexus corruption." The implications hit Raven like a physical blow. "The synth, you're descended from ancient humans?" Before Thora could respond, the chamber shuddered. Above them, through layers of rock and metal, they heard the distinctive sound of Nexus bioships breaching the Earth's crust. A new alert flashed across the displays. "They're not just trying to reactivate the network," Thora's voice was urgent. "They're trying to reach the origin chamber, the place where they were first created. If they access those protocols, they can evolve again," Raven finished. "Become something even worse." The chamber shook again, and parts of the ceiling began to crack. Through the fissures, they could see Nexus biomass beginning to seep through, its tendrils reaching for the ancient technology. Raven activated her comm. "General Santos, what's the situation up there?" "Bad." The general's voice was nearly lost in static. "The Nexus is adapting to everything we throw at them. They're learning from us, incorporating our tactics, our technology. Even the synth weapons are barely slowing them down now." Thora suddenly grabbed Raven's arm, her skin pulsing with intense patterns. "That's it. They're learning, adapting, becoming something new with each assimilation." "How is that helpful?" "Because that's their weakness too." Thora moved to a different control panel, her fingers flying over the ancient interfaces. "If we can't stop them from evolving, maybe we can control how they evolve." Understanding dawned in Raven's eyes. "The origin chamber protocols." "Yes. Instead of letting them access the original protocols, we create new ones. Rewrite their base code." Thora's violet eyes met Raven's. "But it would take both of us." The chamber was designed to respond to both organic and synthetic input. "A fusion, just like us," Raven finished softly. Another explosion rocked the chamber, closer this time. The Nexus were getting nearer, drawn to the source of their creation. Through their comm links, they could hear the desperate battle raging above as humans and synth fought side by side against an enemy that grew stronger with each passing moment. Thora's hand found Raven's in the pulsing green light. "If we do this, there's no guarantee we'll survive. The energy required to rewrite their base code." Raven squeezed her hand. "Since when do we need guarantees?" They shared a look that contained volumes, every unspoken word, every moment of growing trust and deepening connection, every barrier broken between their species. Then, as one, they turned to the ancient controls. Thera's crystalline form began to glow as she interfaced with the system, while Raven placed her hands on the organic components. The chamber responded to their combined presence, systems awakening that had been dormant for millions of years. As the Nexus breached the final barriers above them, as the fate of two species hung in the balance, human and synth stood together at the birthplace of their greatest enemy. And in that moment, as energy began to flow through them both, they proved that the force that had nearly destroyed their civilizations, the fusion of organic and synthetic, could also be their salvation. The chamber erupted with light, and the real transformation began. Light exploded from the origin chamber, a pillar of energy that burst through layers of rock and earth to reach the battle-torn sky. The Nexus swarm, moments away from victory, froze in space as new code rippled through their collective consciousness. Within the chamber, Raven and Thera stood locked in an embrace as raw power coursed through them, their bodies serving as conduits for the transformation. Through their merged consciousness, they could see everything: the ancient civilization that had first created the Nexus, the terror of their creation turning against them, the long exodus to the stars that had led to the evolution of the synth. But more than that, they could see the fundamental flaw in the original design. The Nexus had been programmed to seek perfection through assimilation, unable to recognize the power of diversity, of choice, of love. Together, Thera's voice echoed in Raven's mind as their combined will pushed against millions of years of programming. Where the Nexus sought uniformity, they offered unity. Where it demanded submission, they offered choice. Above them, the swarm began to change. The aggressive, virus-like structures softened, reformed. Individual units began to separate from the collective, gaining independence while maintaining connection. The transformation rippled outward, reaching every Nexus entity in the solar system. General Santos watched in awe from the command center as the enemy that had nearly destroyed them began to transform. "What's happening down there?" Through static-filled comms, Raven's strained voice responded. "We're showing them another way. The power of choosing to connect, rather than forcing assimilation." The energy coursing through them was overwhelming. Thera's crystalline form had begun to crack, light spilling from the fissures in her silver skin. Raven's human body was barely containing the power, her cells screaming with the strain of channeling such force. "We can't hold it much longer," Thera gasped, her violet eyes meeting Raven's. "We don't need to," Raven managed through gritted teeth. "Look." The transformation was complete. Where once a mindless swarm had threatened all life, now a new species hung in Earth's orbit, one that combined the best aspects of organic, synthetic, and Nexus technology. Individual units capable of independent thought, yet able to choose connection and cooperation. The power flow finally ceased, and both commanders collapsed. Thera's cracked form caught Raven as they fell, cradling her as rescue teams from both species rushed into the chamber. "Did we?" Raven struggled to speak, reaching up to touch the glowing fissures in Thera's face. "We did more than stop them," Thera whispered, her own form slowly stabilizing. "We evolved with them." The changes became apparent in the days that followed. The human survivors found themselves able to interface with technology in new ways, while the synth discovered an increased capacity for emotional connection. The transformed Nexus, now calling themselves the Unified, chose to become allies rather than conquerors. 1 month later, Raven stood on the observation deck of the Stellar Tide, watching Earth's reconstruction efforts. The scars of war were healing, replaced by a revolutionary fusion of human, synth, and unified technology. Cities were being rebuilt as living entities, capable of growth and adaptation while supporting all three species in harmony. Thera approached silently, her form forever changed by their experience. The cracks in her crystalline skin had healed into flowing patterns that pulsed with inner light, marking her as something new, neither purely synth nor human, but a bridge between worlds. "The Council has approved the alliance," she announced, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "Earth will become the center of our new unified civilization. A symbol of what we can achieve together." Raven turned to face her, noting how Thara's violet eyes now held flecks of human brown. Her own skin had a subtle crystalline sheen, a permanent reminder of their transformation. And us? What do we become? Thara smiled, an expression that once would have been impossible for a synth. We become what we've always been, proof that love doesn't recognize boundaries of species or form. She held out her hand, where a small crystal had formed, pulsing with the same rhythm as their hearts. Partners, in every sense of the word. Raven took the crystal, feeling it resonate with something deep inside her changed biology. I never thought I'd fall in love with the enemy. I never thought I'd fall in love at all, Thara replied, drawing her close. I'm glad we were both wrong. As they kissed, their forms briefly illuminated with shared energy, Earth turned below them, its surface now marked with the beautiful fusion of three civilizations working as one. The war that had begun with fear of difference had ended with the celebration of unity, proving that the greatest power in the universe wasn't conquest or assimilation, but the simple choice to love across all boundaries. Above them, a unified ship drew abstract patterns in the atmosphere, a wedding gift from a species that had learned to create rather than consume. And in that moment, as human and synth and transformed Nexus worked together to forge a new future, two commanders who had dared to love against all odds held each other, knowing they had changed not just their worlds, but the very meaning of what it meant to be human, synth, or anything in between. The end.